Welcome to this Peel Yourself Off the Mat edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForest, joined as always on these Mondays by one of my favorite people to talk to here on the show, the always enthusiastic, always energetic, and deeply researched when it comes to degenerate numerology. Mike Jones joins us here on the program. And Michael, you and I were talking just before we came on here about we're both big tennis fans. Tennis is a great betting sport, by the way, because you can see indicators here and there. You can find a lot of long shots. There are always going to be upsets, especially in the majors. Look at this Boisson, the French qualifier who nobody had ever heard of, and she's mowing down heavyweights one after another until she gets to the semifinals and finally runs into the eventual champion, Coco Gauff, who fought off and had to be incredible odds against her when she was down 4-1 and 40 love in the fifth game or the sixth game of the first set against Sabalenka, who's on fire, winning like 16 of the first 22 points. This is your thing now. This is what I love about you. And you're going to tell me you had an inclination at 3-5, love 40, third set, down 2 sets already to nothing, to Yannick Sinner, a guy who's not inclined for the old El Choco like Sabalenka might be. That what kind of price were you getting on Alcaraz to win the thing? And you were thinking about taking a sniff?
No, my sniff was at 4-2 at plus 7-1 in the fourth.
Okay.
That's when I said to myself, why not? Because you're just seeing a number that's just big. And then when it got to 5-3, ESPN, I didn't even look because I thought it was over. He's serving three match points.
Yes.
Return of serve 3 match points, not like having you serve on 3 match points. But at that point, ESPN bets had it at 5,000-1. And I would bet you odds you couldn't bet the other side. Because I've seen certain bets now that I've seen as you start digging into this where late in baseball games or late in the game, you'll just get one. They'll give you just one side of the bet to bet.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's an algorithm that they're watching what you're doing or whatever, but pretty dangerous.
Pull the trigger on it. I mean, are we going to find out somebody actually put a dime on that at 5,000-1? That would be awesome.
You're gonna find it. I'll tell you what. There's gonna be guys out there that would probably play around with that, especially in tennis because they fluctuate each point. You could be 220 and then you go to love 15 and now you're 170. You know what I mean? It's like, the movement is just incredible. And so there's middles out there. So my small middle yesterday was Sinner plus 125 early on in the match on a point, and then going back and taking Alcaraz at 155, 170. So I had a complete middle where I was watching very small money just to mess around. I said, I'll just guarantee a win for a little bit of money. But they're out there. And if you wanted to wait, you could have out there. I bet you could have gotten a big number at Sinner at after the break in the first game of the fifth set that he was going to get destroyed. He was cramping up, as you so eloquently mentioned, and I called it a brain cramp, but you called it a physical cramp.
Well, it looked like it had hit him all of a sudden.
Yeah,
he just got punched in the gut there. One of those delayed reactions to a body shot from the recently passed Mike the Body Snatcher McCallum. And you see the guy gets hit, but then it's like a slow reaction, a late reaction. And it looked like he was dealing with fatigue, but then he bounced back, and the level of play at the end of that thing, if you had any kind of a wager on that, you got your money's worth of a run, win or lose.
Chris Fowler was threw something out on X or Instagram, I don't know which one it was that he said he would have paid $100,000 to broadcast that match. He actually made the statement while he's traveling, getting over to Europe to get ready for Wimbledon. Can't wait, he said. And I looked at that like that was as epic a match that I have seen quality-wise, ball striking, pace, just everything you're watching. And I was enamored with the Federer, Nadal, Djokovic trio, and I go back to following it with McEnroe and Borg and, and Wendell, and, it goes back years. But man, is tennis in some spot now because each week, as my wife, who's a huge fan, picks up, is that there's always a new player coming up that you're seeing, especially in the clay in Europe. You have the Italian now.
Oh, Mizzetti. That's
Mizzetti, who I watched play down here in Miami, and I'm watching him hit one-handed backhands and reminding me of Federer at a young age. Who is this guy? Then I said, oh, that's Mizzetti. Oh, he's really good. So if you get down and get to go to these events, you watch a guy warm up and you really get an idea. Wow, these guys are hitting consistent one-handed backhands less than a foot over the net every time. Yeah. Like they're that good, and that's what's the fun thing to watch. And then when you see that, I would have liked to seen a more lower view of the spins and the top spin. I think the upper view doesn't really give it you get to see the lines, but you don't get to see really what the guy's facing when the ball gets hit back to him or the serve. So I like a lower view, but man, is it just unbelievable. That was one of the better sporting events I've watched in a time when the NBA's been disappointing, the hockey's been great. You kind of want to see something like this. And for the other odd sport likes like me, I got the U.S. Open in golf this week, so it should be a fun next 7 days too.
Yeah, no, that's a great one. There's always a great debate from a degenerate standpoint. What level of possibility do we give to the Live Tour players of coming out with the championship? Now, the implication is they become a bunch of fucking fat cats. We're hearing a lot of that from PGA players who seem. I mean, look, it's very possible that, and we've seen a bunch of guys that defected to the Live Tour that still seem to have some shelf life in them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Mickelson was pretty much finished, or so you thought. I mean, every now and then he throws in a couple of good rounds in succession, but it's been more and more rare and few and far between of late as he's contemplating retirement, I guess, or that this would be his last U.S. Open, possibly. That's what he's being asked. And yet, the only guy that really seems to have it together at this point, maybe you have DeChambeau, who's got this kind of fiery competitiveness, and what Tyrell Hatton, is he the only other guy off the list?
Yeah, I like Joaquin Neiman, who's got a game. He won yesterday in Virginia. Okay. So there's some guys there, younger players that made moves for their country. I mean, I know Neiman's quote was he could bring golf, put a lot of money into golf in Chile, which he so-called has done. So there was some movement when these younger, really good, Latin players went over to live, was really to protect golf in their country. So there's been some positives for some of these players, but it just seems like the 54-hole game doesn't really translate, to the big majors. And maybe these guys feel a little bit more pressure as all these players do in majors now. It becomes tough. And then as Brooks Koepka has probably accurately stated, that when you get to a major, you're really only beating 20 guys. There's really only 20 guys that you really have to worry about because the other 140 don't believe that they can win. And I think that's a really great statement when you get there for a really good player to block out, all this. But again, we're going to see, because I know Scotty Scheffler is going to be I think he's going off at like 370, I think, for this, or 350.
On the last 2 tournaments he's been in.
Yeah.
Including the PGA, and then comes right back and wins the Big Jack thing, the Memorial there in Ohio. Oh, my God. I mean, look, you could see he was rounding into form. Is he that much better than everybody else?
Boy, I'll tell you, his back foot moves. You look at his swing, it's a little slightly unorthodox, but is perfect. That impact can tell you. I saw videos of him hitting a 5-iron 226, and it lands 225. It senses where he's going to hit it and hits it there. When you could do that, it's like watching the tennis. Like when you could hit the ball anywhere you want at any time, how good can you go? It was, interesting to watch the Canadian Open yesterday, the final. Sam Burns was a guy who was a 35-1 or 40-1 on Saturday, that I looked at and, just saying who can win this thing, who can get there. And then Ryan Fox beats him in the playoff. But it was just really, really interesting. But, yeah, it's tough. When you got a guy who's got the head on straight and can play like this guy and doesn't make bad double bogeys and just consistently gets up and down from everywhere. You watch Scheffler, he's not necessarily hitting every green, but you're almost at the point watching it, something similar to Tiger Woods where he's 50 yards off in the rough. He's going to get up and down, and he does. It's like he saves par. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it just comes down to this game's going down to putters, but I can tell you this. I've seen some videos. This Oakmont, golf club is going to be no joke. When these guys go in there and play, it's going to be one hell of a test. So I think, I'd like to look at maybe a 7-under winner, 6-under winner. You're going to see something pretty low. You won't see like the 18s like you saw in Canada. You're going to see a very tough, real test of golf. So we'll see if the live guys can compete with that, because I know that their golf courses aren't nearly as tough as some of these events that they're going to go face. So,
all right, who's going to win it?
I don't know. I kind of think there's always something there to go with find a long shot. I'll have one for you Thursday. Yeah. I'll text it to you so we can put it out there. I haven't really dug into. It's hard to bet against Scheffler. I go back to the PGA, which I found very fascinating. Here's a guy who's 5 shots back. He starts even, 5 shots back, and he was laying 360 or 350, and he went down to 3-1. Then he's 8 shots back, and he went to like 280. like on Friday. So it was
Yeah.
like you just see it's really how many guys you have to jump. So if you get a guy who's in the top 25 after the first day, it might be a guy to look at because I think the stats show that you have to be in the top 15 to win after the first day. So
Yeah. The usual throwaways lately have been Ludwig Oberg.
right.
Everybody's sending it in on this guy. Did he finally win a tournament recently, or
Nah, he's been
was cut out?
struggling actually. He's been struggling. I think he
Shane
missed a cut.
Lowry is always a player.
Right.
Yeah,
Lowry was at tied for the lead yesterday at one point. Made a real run.
the
Yeah, I
professor
mean these
always
guys
wins
are all
the
good.
most. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, we hit one 45-1 many years ago. It came in the same week actually that I predicted, or same year that I predicted that the opening score in the World Cup would be an own goal by Brazil. Sure enough, that happened, and then we had Martin Keimer. I was looking for the nondescript European schmenk
Yeah.
who often surfaces in these type of events and
Mm-hmm.
wins. And I'd seen he had been the former number one, but it seemed like a bogus number one. It was like being a
Right.
WBO heavyweight champion, where you're going, no, who did he beat? The
Right.
champion? I never saw this guy before. All of a sudden, he's got a world heavyweight title.
Yeah.
And, so he was like a number one very briefly. Then he kind of was in a little bit of a slump. He was in a tailspin, and he seemed to be bouncing back. So I bet him at 45-1, and that was it. I don't know that I've hit another one since. I think I've cashed a couple of times when Spieth won the British Open. Now the
Yeah.
Open that one year when they absolutely robbed Kuchar, Matt Kuchar,
Right.
of the tournament. Because remember that
Yeah, he hit one in way out of bounds, had a drop
Spieth
by
is like in some garbage dump somewhere.
the truck. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
unbelievable. He hit the shot of a lifetime, and then that gets up and down and makes him
They
far from
let him
where he
drop it in the fairway. It was
Yeah,
unbelievable ruling. One of
crazy.
my rare times where I capitalized on a favorable ruling for
Mhm.
one of my players. All right, so we'll get into that a little bit later on in the week. That should be a lot of fun. Let's do a little pucks and some hoops.
Sure.
Not unexpected, always interesting to me. You study these kind of things closely. As you had OKC 9.5 point favorite in the game that they lost. Come back, they're a 10.5 point favorite the next game.
Mhm.
That went somewhat as anticipated, I
Right.
believe, because they win by 16, covered the 10 and a hook, and
Mhm.
now have evened up the series at one apiece.
Mhm.
Where do you go if you're betting this series now? Do you bet
Well,
that Indiana wins one more game? Do you think they bounce back in this thing? I mean, how are you looking at the rest of the series from a wagering standpoint?
you just had to figure out last night was going to happen. It should have happened in game one. They fell asleep and let it come back. Come in. One of these. Now we're rooting that Tyrese Halliburton's the second coming of Michael Jordan because he's a closer and he's making shots at the end of games,
Yeah,
5 in the playoff. Look, his stats are down. This is what they predicted. I think we talked about this that there was Lou Dort has done a great job on possessions against Halliburton over the last 120 to stop him. His total his points, rebounds, and assists twice now have gone under. So is he this factor, or is he when he makes a run? Does he want the ball in his hands late in games, or can he do it for 48 minutes? So here's the thought: they're 0-7 against the number OKC on the road in the playoffs. That would tell me let me grab 5.5 and see what happens. I predicted OKC in 5. Obviously, I think that's out the window after losing game one. I would probably be surprised if Indiana doesn't get a game there. Even looking last night, they got it to 23. They cut it back to 11. It was back and forth. I looked at the stats. They only hit 14 of 40 from three, so they were around 35%, 34. Not if they go back to 46%, they might. They had 5 more threes. It's a close game. You just got to watch if OKC figures a way to really get out on the perimeter. I just see it as a tough spot. I don't know that Indiana really wants to go to the rim all the time. And so they kick balls out, they pass back, they try to get that open look. And I think that's where you got to figure it out. And teams get more familiar with each other as the series goes on. You see weird things happen early on in the series, and then all of a sudden it takes place of where it is, the mindset and all that. So I don't know that I would lay 5.5 with OKC on the road after what I've seen. They had the dominant win over 55 against Memphis, so you kind of want to take them on the road when they're laying 6.5 or 9.5 or 8, whatever they're laying in the first round. Then you get to the second round, and then they got Denver, and then they make a huge win in this game two, win by 40 after having the same thing happen game one where they get beat in the buzzer, so they cover that game. I just don't see the differences in this particular series. I was really shocked at game one. I just felt like this. And looking at game two, watching to see, oh, here, down 15 with 8 minutes to go, they got him where they want him.
Yeah.
You're thinking, and you can't think like that because it's still a 10-1 shot, a 12-1 shot, which don't come up in horses, as you know, all the time. And it's like, it's just, that's the whole thing when you're looking at this saying, where does it stop? So my thought is, I don't know that I'd lay 5.5 with a team that hasn't covered a road game, but I'm not in love with it, to grab it. So that's kind of where I stand.
Halliburton, interestingly, you mentioned the defense on him. No free throw attempts in the game.
Yeah.
If you would bet over and under a half and you took the under, you were cashing, which you're thinking it's not as if this guy never goes to the basket or would be unlikely to ever be fouled, at least with the body on some kind of a jump shot that he takes from the field. But no free throw attempts, while SGA, who we would have to say would be the number one star on OKC, as Halliburton is to Indiana, 11 of 12 from the strike. Right. So, I mean, the big differential there. Does it display a lack of aggression on the part of Halliburton and trying to be this catalyst that they desperately need? I mean, they need this guy to be good in the series and not get badly outperformed by the league's MVP. All right, so that one's ongoing. And tonight here in South Florida, where we originate the program from here on NoFilter.net, the Florida Panthers will be hosting the Edmonton Oilers. I say all games in the playoffs are pivotal. Certainly game one was, as Edmonton prevailed in overtime. Game two, Panthers come back, double OT. Brad Marchand, quite an addition. Now, Bill Zito, the GM of the Florida Panthers, who said this many times on the show, is not the universal executive of the year. I'm not even talking just sports. I'm talking about in any company. For these late season pickups, it's 3:59:59 with a 4:00 trade deadline, and he gets Marchand from the Boston Bruins, an aging veteran who clearly would add a little bit of chutzpah to whatever it was, a little bit of spice to the deeper lines that the Panthers put out there. And the guy's been spectacular, man. I mean, he clearly was the star of game number two as he gets the shorthanded goal and then scores the game winner in double OT. An amazing addition. But what do you see tonight? There are some that would stipulate that the Panthers have sort of outplayed Edmonton overall.
Yeah.
And they're doing this without necessarily getting great contributions from a couple of their guys that are usually the best players in Barkov and Reinhart.
Yeah.
So what happens tonight? I for some reason, as much as I was feeling a sense of unease about the series as a Panther fan, because I thought Edmonton might be motivated by enough in terms of trying to avenge last year that they wouldn't find themselves in this hole. They weren't going to come out flat in the first few games or lose the first three, which they haven't. What do you make of tonight, though? I mean, you would have to think. I don't know why I'm feeling, as opposed to my anxiety about the series, that Florida prevails tonight.
Yeah, I'm leaning that way. You just got to feel like maybe they right the ship. They lose two great games, by the way. I mean, how can you be playoff hockey, back-to-back overtime games in the Stanley Cup Finals? There's just one little sneaky surprise that Edmonton is that good. Edmonton's got the X factor. Guy who you want to go. If I could give any advice to anybody who's a remote hockey fan, if you got the money, go see this guy live in these kind of games because he is something to watch. Connor McDavid, I'm speaking of.
Yeah.
And, that makes you think one thing. So to me, I'm looking at the over 2.5 goals for Edmonton. Bobrovsky's been, back on or hot or cold on these home games. So I'm going to think, okay, now you have the 6.5 total, which this is the fifth time now, the sixth, because it was in 6.5 in the first two games. Although I heard some places had 6 in game one, but there's only in the last 35, 40 years, there's only been 6.5 on one of the series, which was Chicago at Pittsburgh in 2011. So these are the highest totals. So you have 2 games that are going over. Do the players outfox the goalies? Now you like the edge with Bob. I thought he would be the edge for X factor in the series. Skinner hasn't been as sharp as you want. Do they go to Picard? I don't know. See what happens, but I kind of like Edmonton's 2.5 better than the Florida 3.5. I think 3.5 is a lot of goals for the Panthers, but you're getting plus money. But you kind of think, maybe that would be the play I would try here. Is just that you still can win 5-3 if you're a Florida fan, and these games continue to score and these goalies continue to struggle. But Edmonton with that offense, you get on the power play, they're very lethal. Do the Panthers take those sometimes stupid penalties? And if we go back, losing game 4 against Carolina, sometimes they have these letdowns when they get home. Lost game 3 against Tampa. You just kind of think, now they got all this momentum, the crowd is high, and they're easy. It's never easy in hockey. So do the road team come and prevail? I'm not sure, but the lines are telling you they're only laying 140, so they're not making them a big favorite after decisive wins. So the price maker's telling you they're pulling it back a little bit. So I'm going to go over 2.5 goals with the Oilers going against the norm, seeing if does the puck still hit the netting, and that'll be my play for tonight.
I love the way you've dissected this down to its most remote minutia to take half a total, one single team total. Did you ever think back in the days when you're calling in sides and over-unders to your bookie that
No.
you'd be sitting there slicing up a hockey game to the point where it's, okay, I'll take Edmonton over 2.5 goals, but that's the way it is. I mean, that's what gambling has become. It's certainly changed. If you're old school, you're probably missing the entire ride here as all of these new things have come into it.
Yeah, we have to realize that it's the fantasy companies that are dominating the legal sports betting in the United States. So these are companies that started off not as old school guys like us.
Right.
I know for facts that some of the old school guys that were the greatest bookmakers applied for jobs at these companies and they were turned away. They want this young kind of thing. And when you talk to a younger guy, they're betting the props. Who's going to score the first goal? Sam Bennett. Plus, I'm listening to VSiN and Stormy Bonatomi's go, I got Sam Bennett plus 180 for the score a goal tonight. I won, and they get 180 for 100. So they find these different type bets, and that's what I think is kind of driven. So I'm going to go a little bit different and say a team bet, but a one-team bet. So I'm kind of breaking my mold to get into this new form of betting.
Yeah.
With the live, it's interesting. Again, Panthers, up 3-1 in game 1, right? And blow it, and get a 6-1 factor. So, if you're out there looking at price, and it's a tough pull, it's like you need a bankroll to do this because you're going to lose more than you're not. But in this particular playoffs, there were two sequences two stats, that I heard going into this Stanley Cup final. I think it was about game 4 or 5, maybe in the finals in the Dallas game. I had heard that if you were laying 2.5 goals with the home team, you were plus 52 units. And if you were laying 1.5 with the home team, with the favorite, you were plus 36. So what we used to be these 1-goal games and overtime games we're getting in this series, previous series, that 2.5. So if you laid 2.5 with Carolina on the road, you were probably getting 12-1 on a 3-0 game in game 4. So that's the whole thing, is that there's different strategies of betting. And if you're like the big dogs, and just by the spreads, how they're not even giving you a fair shake at the line when you're getting this, you're probably should be getting 30-1 when you're getting 18-1 on these long odd bets.
Yeah.
They're there for you if you want to take a shot and go after it. I think that's what the modern gambler is doing now. The younger gambler, I think, wants that huge payout, and they don't want to lay. No one's laying. I mean, I saw something yesterday. It was very fascinating. Not to break the subject, but so I had a little bit of parlay going, and I wanted to bet a total to hedge out a bet, and they didn't even give me the side I wanted in a total in my bet. It was like they were breaking it down that they only wanted to give out one side of it, and I'm like, what is going on? And I see that now at a few times, like you couldn't bet, when, at certain points, both sides of a game. So I think they're really looking at algorithms, seeing what people are doing and seeing what bets. And that's what you're getting. I think there was a bet last night on the Yankees-Red Sox game where I saw in the 8th inning when it was 11-5 that you could bet the Yankees at plus 2,500, but you couldn't bet the Red Sox on a lay. Like, what's going on with that?
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, they used to only have to beat Louis the Lip Lipschitz in Capital. And now you're going against algorithms and artificial intelligence and things that are being computed and computed at the speed of sound and light, and you're trying to compete with that with your own gut feeling and instinct that I think this guy's going to make this putt.
Right.
All right. Any baseball on the slate?
Yeah, we're going to jump in. We're going to go with I'm going to throw an old adage out at you from years back, and that worked pretty well in the early 2000s, and when the rivalry was at its peak, when the Red Sox started winning their World Series. But a guy brought this to my attention. I started following it, and it was good. And I'm going to go after it tonight a little bit. So when the Yankees play the Red Sox, he always said to bet against it because the emotion of that series and the rivalry, when they went on the road to play the next game, they lost. And I must have had it like 5 or 6 times in a row where both teams played the next night and both lost. I mean, it was incredible how often it worked. Well, tonight it falls into a little factor. Baz going up against Bello, who's been okay, but the Red Sox are laying the 110 in the series. I might take a shot here with Tampa, figuring a big win. The Bats got late last night. Now they got to go back to Boston, all talking about the series and all that. So I'm going to take a chance with the Rays. And I'm going to go up against the Marlins. I'm going to take the Pirates at a pick 'em tonight. Take a chance in Pittsburgh. I'm going to place the Marlins. I'm going to have a ton of success. I'm going to take a shot with a low number, only laying 107 with the Pirates. Give you 2 for baseball.
That would be nice if Paul Skeens was on the hill for that bet. But you wouldn't get that kind of number.
Sure. No.
All right, excellent stuff. Big Gunner podcast that's coming up tomorrow. You guys are getting closer and closer. I thought Tommy DeVito throwing a ball to his mother in the parking lot outside of in East Rutherford there, outside MetLife. But what do you have on the show tomorrow?
Yeah, we're just again we're preparing. The mini camps are here. The players are OTAs and stuff like that. I guess the mini camp is the 17th, starts for the Giants when everybody's there and they put the pads on a little bit more than they would normally. I just you get a little bit of these 7-7 young stuff. You see the darts throwing the ball. I feel very comfortable, like I've said it here on the show before, and I talk about it. The quarterback room's going to be better. It's just whether this team. I think this team's got enough to challenge in the division, not for the title, but to challenge the teams in the division. The key factor to me is always we went 0-6 for the first time in the division since this 14 division came out, and that is unacceptable. So you're again, I've talked this before. You're opening up at Washington and at Dallas. I would probably take the Giants in that week 1 just because expectations are high. I think I saw the week 1 line is 6.5. I might buy it up to 7 and take my chance of the Giants completely healthy, stay in that game against the Commanders early on, watching what happens in preseason. Jaden Daniels, a little sophomore jinx, a little disappointment. Giants have played the Commanders very tough. Last year was the first sweep for them, I think, in a decade for the Commanders. So I think we bounce back, and I think you're going to see, as I talk about going back to my days with the Giants, that these division games are so important. Bill Parcells put a ton of emphasis on them, and I think when you really look at this jumping out, do the Commanders take us seriously? I don't know, with all the expectations and the things that are going to happen surround them. But you're going to have to wait and see if there's injuries, if something happens in camp or whatever. But we'll talk about the schedule and where I think the record's going to fall. All right,
sounds good. I love that you're also already are diving into psychoanalysis of where teams will be at mentally in week 1 of the season.
You talk about something.
What the world come to? You've got a hockey over under on a 1 team's total.
Well, we'll see. So hopefully hey, look, if it's 3-0 in the first period, I'm home free. I don't have to worry about anything else. That's how you look at it. So,
all right, kiddo. Always a pleasure, my friend. Big Gunner podcast. Thanks. Tomorrow. That's Mike Jones, ladies and gentlemen. And thanks for tuning in. I'm Jeff DeForest. Peel yourself off to Matt Monday. Always a lot of fun being with you. And we'll join you again tomorrow with Scotty M on the scene. And thanks for being with us for today's edition of Bury Your Bookie.